even administrative password, according to certain lawsuits, was being shared all over the place. You can see they passed a hand count rule. It requires 3 election workers to unseal every box of ballots, print it from the scanner, and hand count them. That's great. They all sound like pretty damn good rules to me. But look, the Democrats hate it. So they filed a bunch of lawsuits. This court should block these rules before it can go into effect and wreak havoc on the general election. They flip out, file 6 or 7 lawsuits to stop this. Why is that? The Georgia State Board of Elections is now facing a barrage of lawsuits. Let me show you this article. You know who this organization is: Democracy Docket, Mark Elias, the people who are responsible for initiating litigation all over the country in support and on behalf of the Democratic Party. They've assembled a summary of all of the filings that have been launched against the state election board. And the state election board, as we've covered here, are people that, in our opinion, who've been doing a great job at demanding actual accountability in Georgia. We remember Judge Amy Totenberg said that there were major problems with the old machines, and they got new machines in 2018, and the systemic problems of implementing the new machines continued, right? It's almost like the machines aren't necessarily the problems, although they have their problems. They are implemented so poorly whereby the even administrative password, according to certain lawsuits, was being shared all over the place so that everybody could access all the machines and tip the scales, manipulate the numbers, literally do whatever they want. Admin root access, according to some testimony. So this board has already issued a subpoena for Fulton County, demanded that they give some of the 2020 records in a 3-2 vote, have been snubbed time and time and time again. And as we know, Fulton County is a disaster. It's got Fani Willis, Nathan Wade were there, and Prosecutor Love, Adrian Love. The whole operation involved even Fani Willis, in her case, lying to the judges, right? These people who are supposed to be prosecuting crimes and investigating the fraud are lying to judges to their face in their own courts. So you can't trust anything that comes out from them. But the state election board has now changed some rules to try to create some integrity around the election. You can see they passed a hand count rule. It requires 3 election workers to unseal every box of ballots, print it from the scanner, and hand count them to ensure that the counts match the machines. That's great. It's reconciling the vote. This rule will require election workers to count the total number of ballots, but not which candidate received more votes. This rule took effect on Monday. They hate it. There's also a reconciliation reports rule that was also passed. It mandates that counties publish online reports detailing the difference between the number of total ballots cast and the total number of voters reported voting in each precinct. This rule took effect on Monday. That's interesting. Why would that data even be different at all? Total ballots cast and the number of voters reported in each precinct. Well, maybe there's a discrepancy. Why might that be? There's also another reconciliation rule that they passed that they all hate. Requires either each county board of elections or election workers to verify the total ballot count against tabulation tape from each individual ballot scanner in the county. The rule took effect on Monday. So reconcile the votes. This is a daily reporting rule. Counties should issue a daily report with details of which voters have cast their votes early or through absentee ballots. Took effect on Monday. And there's also this rule. Requires election workers and 2 witnesses to record the ballot count from the tabulation tape in every ballot scanner in a given polling location. They hate that. They want 3 people to look at it. Why not just have one person look at it who is best friends with Fani Willis? There's another rule, increasing the number of designated locations where poll watchers may observe in the election process. They don't want you to watch them at all. That took effect on Monday. And this rule allows other individuals, county board members, to examine the election-related documents created during the conduct of the election prior to the certification of results, and states that a county board can only certify an election after a reasonable inquiry that the tabulation is accurate. Now, there was another ruling that came out from a judge that is going to impact some of this, but we'll come back to that later. Now, there's also a Dropbox rule. Requires voters who drop off an absentee ballot at a Dropbox location to provide signature, photo ID, and if applicable, evidence of their relationship to the person who they're submitting the ballot on behalf of. So you can't just go and drop off ballots for a bunch of, individuals or like random people. Is it your mother, your sister, blood relationship? What is it? And then there's a surveillance rule. Now, this requires video surveillance at drop boxes and states that ballots placed in non-monitored drop boxes should not be counted. That rule also went into effect. They all sound like pretty damn good rules to me. You have actual monitoring of the votes. You've got reporting of the votes. You've got witnesses observing the votes. all you're doing is reconciling the digital count versus the physical hand count. And yeah, like it's going to take some additional resources to do this. It's going to take a little longer because you've got some additional processes. But look, the Democrats hate it. So they filed a bunch of lawsuits. So we've got this case, Abrahamian versus the state election board. He sued them. The DNC and the Democratic Party of Georgia and a candidate for the House sued the state election board over these rules. And so that already went to trial. A bench trial held October 1st. We're awaiting for a decision on that one. They say these rules violate Georgia laws that require them to certify the election, making it mandatory. You don't have the discretion to delay certification at all, is what they said. So you can think about that as forced certification. Wait, doesn't certification mean you have to certify something to certify it? To certify that it meets a certain standard? Not really. It just means just sign the friggin' form, okay? Here's another one. Eternal Vigilance versus Georgia. Got a hearing coming up this Wednesday. Of course, we'll talk about it. But a GOP person sued saying that the rules here were unconstitutional from the board, right? So every one of those rules should be removed, even though that board was created through the legislature. We also, of course, saw this one, Cobb County versus the state election board. There's a hearing scheduled for this one today. So a county board sued the state board, and we did read this one. They said that those rules conflict with state law, and so there's a hearing on that. We'll have another ruling very soon. And then you can see there's another hearing this Wednesday in this case, Crawford versus state election board as well. Again, Democrats, Democratic Party of Georgia, they sued the board. They don't like the hand count rule. Stop actually reconciling and confirming the votes are accurate. They sued saying, nope, you guys usurped the legislature's power, which is hilarious because they've done that all over the country. And they did that a lot in 2020 to change all of the rules on the back of COVID. And they're still doing this. They just changed the manuals now, usurping what the law says they need to do. Now, additionally, the board violated other rules. And then look, here's another one. Muskogee County Board sued the state election board. So I believe that's 6, maybe 7 lawsuits. This was another one. Fulton County Board of Registration also sued Georgia. Here's another one, Thurmond. It must be like 7 cases now. So they're all suing, right? It's a bloodbath in Georgia right now. They created a series of election laws and rules as the state election board that obviously are going to make sure that people who are voting are people who should be voting. Video surveillance, they hate. Photo ID, drop boxes. Why do they oppose all of these rules so much? Is it going to disenfranchise votes to have 3 election workers to unseal the box and count them? No, it doesn't disenfranchise anybody. It just means that the counting is more accurate because now you're doing it twice. And now it's much harder to cheat because you've got observers and multiple people who are verifying what is actually happening. And so the Democrats obviously hate it. Here was one lawsuit that we'll just poke through. You see, this was filed in Fulton County, Fanningland. It is the Democratic National Committee, the Democratic Party of Georgia, who are suing the state election board. Just one of these many cases that have come down against them. It's a 38-pager. I'll show you just a little bit of it. We can get a flavor for it. But they're upset. They say just 42 days before the election, they've adopted a rule that the Attorney General, Christopher Carr, has concluded it's very likely unlawful and that Raffensperger has cautioned against, right? So these 2 other people say, well, we don't like those rules, saying that they're right. This court should block these rules before it can go into effect and wreak havoc on the general election. They're very upset. The new hand count rule adds an additional hurdle to collecting and tabulating ballots. At thousands of precincts, trios of poll workers will be required to hand count ballots to verify that they match. If they identify an inconsistency, they must correct it if possible. Figure out what the problem is. Yeah, what's good? What is the inconsistency? Why would that be? What is a proper margin of error? There should be 0 inconsistencies, right? Now, the rule violates Georgia law, Democrats say, because it adds a new requirement that we didn't already contemplate. And they exceeded their rulemaking authority, right? They only have the ability to create regulations that are discussing the orderly conduct, but they can't go out and like make them do a bunch of new stuff. The hand count rule is so improper on its face that both Georgia's chief election officer and its chief law enforcement officer, the Secretary of State and the AG, felt compelled to speak out against it. And the Secretary of State's office similarly singled this out as one of the most concerning rules under consideration. They don't want you to count the ballots at all. Requires tremendous personnel resources and time, could cause significant delays in reporting, needlessly introduce the risk of error, lost ballots, or fraud. By reconciling the votes? And like the AG said, the Secretary's office warned that it is too far late in the process to do it. None of this should have come as a surprise to the SEB. In sum, they say the hand count rule is contrary to the election code, exceeds their rulemaking authority, and so to protect the state's laws and to prevent election night chaos, this court should declare the hand count rule exceeds their authority and enjoin that rule from going into effect. So the election machines are a disaster in Georgia. As we talked about, there's allegations from other people suing, saying that the implementation, the security, execution, not the machines per se themselves, but they bought a bunch of machines and then they gave them all the same password. And then they gave everybody the same password and everybody was using it. You go, wait, that's not one user, one password. So you can actually chronicle and log who's accessing the device and making certain changes, right? Security was a disaster. So they propose a different rule and implement a different rule. We're going to also count them by hand. They flip out, file 6 or 7 lawsuits to stop this. Why is that? Because they don't want people to actually count the votes that are cast. They'd rather have the machines do it. And saying that, you know, a lot of the other explanations here are technicalities. They didn't provide adequate notice. They didn't provide a statement of reason. So they failed some other, statutory mechanism. SEB violated the Georgia APA. They didn't provide an explanation. They didn't give time for public notice or comment or any of those things. And by the way, the board is fed up with Fulton County. That's why they issued a subpoena, because Fulton County is not even complying with the terms of their settlement agreement. They were supposed to implement more monitors and do other things and deliver records. They never did. They're just dragging their feet. They say, well, we need permission from the Board of Commissioners in order to do that. And then the Board of Commissioners doesn't add it to their agenda. So then the other committee says, well, we didn't get permission from them, so I guess we can't do it either. And you're going, what? You agreed that you would. So the whole process there is really problematic. And as we always say here, we wonder why the lady doth protesteth too much over here with the Democratic Party and why they're so flipped out about hand counting ballots. Now, clearly, it will require some additional resources. Probably will require some additional time. So it's going to be interesting to see how this gets settled and whether we get votes and ballots counted quickly or whether it's going to take multiple days. It already took multiple days last time, and they stopped counting at 2 a.m. after the water main broke. So yeah, forgive us if we don't trust you in Georgia to deliver fair and accurate results. Hand counts should be happening based on the bad machines, the bad prosecutors and the bad government officials, the very problematic Secretary of State, and how they have not addressed. The Secretary of State even says he doesn't have a responsibility to make sure the machines are still credentialed. That's how bad it is. Admitted that. And McAfee agreed, because the system is open and prime for the taking, and it's designed that way.